Don't fall prey to this idea that you're going to get some kind of easy way, that there's an easy road to success at this. This is work, it's sweat. If you really aspire to be a professional, you've got to work at it for years and work hard at it and be passionate about it.
Tom Scott, when I hear those two names put together, it embodies to me this incredible journey of music that I experienced when I came out to LA in 1976 and heard you with the LA Express, and this great music you always played and all the associated people that you were playing with, which was an incredible list of all of the greatest artists that I was inspired from. You are still doing this at such an intense pace. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Sessions.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Tom, tell me what you're up to now.
Well, you know, I'm doing a few different things. I do a lot more at home now than I used to. It's just the nature of the business.
Yeah.
I have people who now send me their tracks, rhythm tracks, and they want me to put a solo on, and I'll do it right in my little garage studio and send it back. I also do a bunch of arranging. What I'd want to do is do some. Remember the Super Sax group?
Oh, fantastic.
I want to do some.
Jake Hanna was the drummer.
That's correct, Jake Hanna. He was hysterical.
Great player.
Oh my God, and a great player.
Yeah.
I want to do some things in the style, maybe some standards, but not the ones that Charlie Parker played on, some others, and do the solos in his style and then orchestrate it for five, as if this was the album that Charlie never made, you know what I mean, kind of thing. Imagine this, if you will, sort of thing.
I heard that band live several times at Concerts by the Sea.
Oh wow, sure. I remember it well.
The intensity
of
that. Boy, if you can pull that off and create that, that is absolutely needed in today's music for them to hear those kind of arrangements.
Can't hurt, huh?
Absolutely, for sure.
So I'm doing various arrangements for different people. I'm actually performing very shortly at the Newport Beach Jazz Party, which is an annual thing we have down here in Newport Beach. Ken Poplowski, a wonderful clarinet player, is kind of the host of it. I am hosting a night with a big band. We're playing the music of Oliver Nelson.
Oh,
Oliver Nelson being the guy that actually led to me getting my first solo record contract with Impulse.
How fantastic. So you really have adapted to the change of the music industry by setting up your own studio, having the ability of being able to record these tracks and be at home and enjoy being involved in the business at a heavy level, but still relaxing a little bit.
Look, you know, for years, and thank you, Lord, the phone rang a lot. You know, I didn't have to go very far to find work. And then the business changed, and the whole scene changed. I can't wait for the phone to ring anymore. I've got to figure out how to, and this is the thing that young kids today are facing. They're in a world which is not the world that I grew up in, and they have a different kind of a way to, their path to success of any kind is different. And so I've got a little of that going. I do have a website, and I've done some online interviews such as this, and also I've done teaching. I'm part of the NYU summer jazz program.
Fantastic.
Now. Yeah.
Great program.
It's really fun. And Dr. Dave Schroeder, I don't know where you know him.
Absolutely.
He is. We're like he's like the brother I never had. It's awesome. So, you know, I stay pretty busy. I'm just writing arrangements for, of all people, for that jazz party in Newport Beach, Jack Jones, who at 82
is singing probably better than
still
ever.
singing. Well, he's singing good. He's singing really good in the same keys. He's got the Tony Bennett syndrome. His voice doesn't change much, which is pretty awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. So in this change of the industry the way it is, and we speak about this next generation that watches these interviews, it really is about how they are to prepare their careers by listening to what you are doing and what you have done. So let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to how music entered your life and how you started playing sax. But listen, as a musical director, as a producer, an arranger, composer, there's a lot that you have done with 3 Grammys. I mean, we're talking about some serious commitment here. Where did it begin?
Well, my parents were both very musical, and I had the added advantage of having grown up around my father, who was a professional television and film composer. He wrote music for the Dragnet television series, Lassie, for 12 years, and a whole lot of other credits. He worked at Republic Pictures in the beginning. John Wayne and Gene Autry Westerns, they did a lot of that kind of stuff. And my father actually wrote at least In those days, there was a crew of composers and arrangers that kind of shared the duties. But my dad's single film composing credit was on a John Wayne film called The Wake of the Red Witch. So I grew up in this environment that was clearly very musically oriented, and my father, being a composer, always had a room, usually an off room somewhere or a den, as his studio. And he had an upright piano and a drafter's table, right? And he would sit there and write music, and we'd hear these, and he writes a very wonderful kind of a bitonal, very interesting harmonic, great harmonic sense and great linear sense. This is a thing which I could do a whole hour on this. What he taught me about the line, the value of a line, is more important than being concerned about vertical chords. Vertical chords matter, but when you're dealing with instruments, single note instruments, they have to weave a pattern of something that makes sense rather than jumping around to accommodate a chord. Right. If the line is good, that takes over, that takes precedence over being correct in the harmonic sense. So he taught me that. I never had a lesson with him per se, but by the time I was 8 or 9, the new music teacher at my elementary school came around and was recruiting members for the orchestra, and if I was to take up an instrument, it would get me out of class on Wednesday mornings for 3-4 hours. So I thought, heck, why not? So I rented talked to my dad about it, and I guess I said something about maybe the saxophone later, and he says, well, I think this was a symphony orchestra kind of instrumentation, so no saxophone. But he said, if you take up the clarinet, because he was friends with all the best studio musicians in town, including great woodwind players. 3 or 4 of them became my teachers over a period of time. So he said, take the clarinet. So I rented a metal clarinet from the school for, I think, $5 for the semester.
A metal clarinet?
Yeah.
What kind of sound did that have?
Not great. But as soon as I got into junior high, I wanted to be in the dance band. They call it a stage band now.
Stage band, yeah.
But then it was called dance band, and rehearsed on Wednesdays after school, and I just, oh man, I got to get in this thing. The only opening was the baritone sax. So the big baritone, so I used the schools, and I lugged it home, 12-year-old kid lugging a baritone sax to the bus and stuff. It was a bit of a pain in the butt, but anyway, that got me in the band. And my father, going back a little bit, so when I was just on the clarinet, my dad wanted me to have good influence, as we're going to talk about today. Yeah. So he bought me the 1938 Benny Goodman Carnegie Hall Jazz Concert recording with Harry James and Teddy Wilson and Lionel Hampton and Gene Krupa and all these people. Yeah. I wore it out. In fact, I was so obsessed that while my friends on the weekend were like playing whatever they were doing, football or whatever they were doing, I was sitting there with my phonograph with this thing on, and I'd have my clarinet and a music stand and a pencil, and boom, and I'd hear Benny go, I'd pick the notes out one at a time and then write them down. And,
what a skill, the transcription.
I was horrible. It was hell at first.
Yeah.
But I just forced myself to do it, and you work at something hard enough, with a little luck, you can get good at it. And then I started transcribing. So now the baritone sax, he bought me a Jerry Mulligan record, who I fell in love with. And had the privilege.
One of the greatest Barry players.
Had the privilege later on of playing on one of his records.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, and that was a joy I can't even describe.
So you started to transcribe some of his stuff.
I became obsessed with the baritone and he had a concert jazz band, which was called Clark Terry and a bunch of people. Yeah. There was this Verve recording of the Jerry Mulligan and the concert jazz band, which still to this day is one of the awesome things. And he was a great arranger, and I loved his sound and his ideas as a soloist. His ideas were very musical. It made sense, Yeah. It wasn't just a series of hip licks, which is a lot of that going on now, I think. Obviously, I got a real lucky start, and then got an alto and then a tenor, and I started to work right around the age of 17, 18. First of all, playing, country clubs and dances and stuff like that. Yeah. By the time I was, I guess, 18, I got this gig with Oliver Nelson's big band playing live, and it went 2 weeks at a club in LA, no longer there, called Marty's on the Hill, And after the end of that 2 weeks, producer Bob Thiel, the creator of Impulse Records,
Yes.
with the roster of Coltrane and Mingus and Eric Dolphy, and you know, and I'm like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. I just want to meet the guy, right? So at the end of I had a big solo on Oliver's arrangement of Milestones, which is real fast, real up-tempo. And I was just like, oh man, this is thrilling. And I was like, I must have made a good impression, because at the end of the gig, it was like that story of Lana Turner at Schwab's drugstore.
Right.
Bob Thiel walks out of me, or you know, I was up on the stage packing up, and he walks down on the floor above me. And he looks up and says, "Hey kid, you want to make a record for me?" Yes, Mr. Thiel, I'd love to. And that was the start of my recording career, solo recording career.
Boy, how fantastic! You mentioned about how some of these licks that are being played now,
yes,
as opposed to structural,
yes,
you know, theory that is being played musically.
Yeah.
Where this generation is now, where they hear things on YouTube and they steal these different licks. What you did in the old school, and this is old school, and I was there with you, needle on that record, and we just took bits of it, and then after we transcribed that and understood it, we then went to the next section and built it step by step.
Well, yeah, and listen, I did a heck of a lot of stealing in the beginning, because that's how you look. Right. It's a, you know, I've explained this a lot. It's a language, just like English is a language. When you start as a young person learning a language, you learn phrases. Same with jazz. You learn it's some isolated phrases, and maybe you learn them in a few different keys. But as you keep doing this, you then can build sentences, and then maybe paragraphs. You know, but the point is not to get stuck on just reciting licks. You know, right, it's really a tool to make make a meaningful statement, right, using the language of jazz.
Right. So this is 1968, around that time?
Yes.
You're like 20?
Yes.
All right, so now here you are, now you have this first chance to record.
Right.
The fear goes into our system, because now you got to map out what are you going to record. How do you choose the songs? How do you map this out?
Okay, well, the first record I did, I didn't really make a choice. I did what Bob Thiel wanted me to do. Okay. And at that point, I think he thought he could make me into kind of a pop instrumental guy. Right. So the first record I did was called Honeysuckle Breeze. It was a bunch of arrangements done by some hot Hollywood arrangers at that time, who I've maintained friendships with for years afterwards. Ian Freeburn Smith and Tom Baylor and John Baylor, and the prominent studio musicians of the time. And I played these cover records of current hits at that time. Aretha's Baby I Love You, Never My Love, da 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 da, that tune. A bunch of stuff like that. I think Mellow Yellow, I don't know. Anyway, tunes like that, but done with this instrumental, hot Hollywood studio rhythm section, which included rhythm guitar player named Glenn Campbell. Oh my gosh. He wasn't even a star yet. I remember this, he had a station wagon with sequins all over it, and it said, Glenn Campbell, country star, you know? But he was a great guitar player. Yeah. Really fantastic.
And that goes back to those early days when he was playing with the Wrecking Crew.
Well, yeah, that's correct.
In and out of those with Hal Blaine and Don Randy.
So, so Jim Gordon, the drummer, was on it in my first record. Carol Kay was on it. And that kind of, the word starts to spread out about me. And so and then I started to work, you know, as a studio guy.
So your career starts growing, you start to get calls from different artists that are coming in. So are you starting to do you're freelancing at this point? Uh-huh. Okay, so what happened at that point?
Then I started writing television music. I got friendly with Dave Grusin, and Dave, of course, is a monster film and television composer. But he wrote the theme for, and it was '69, I think, a short-lived show starring a then unknown guy named Burt Reynolds, and where he played a cop. Dave wrote this theme, but couldn't do the underscore, so he recommended me, and so there I am, you know, with an orchestra of about 36 people, including all my favorite guys, including Ray Brown and Bud Shank and Vince DeRosa, the #1 French horn player forever in LA, and all my friends, you know, and string section and everything. So I wrote this dramatic music. You know, I used my father as a model. You know, I could still hear the kinds of harmonic things he was doing, and kind of the language. I came at a time when composers, there weren't many who had figured out how to incorporate the contemporary rhythms of pop music into underscore. Right. Dave was one of them. Certainly Dave was one of them, but it was a young man, relatively young man's game, because the older guys were more rooted in symphonic stuff, you know, and inspired by people like Max Steiner and the old film composing crowd, that stuff is unbelievable. And which John Williams still carries on that tradition in an unbelievable fashion.
So you're associated with some serious musicians at the stage.
Yes.
You're still pretty young at this point.
Yeah.
But you're thrown into this.
Well, I think I hurled myself.
Great point. So what happened now? Were you still studying the instrument? Who were you listening to at that time?
Oh, well, along the way, getting to that point, I, of course, back up a second, when I was into Mulligan and Benny Goodman, and then I got way into what I considered for years, and still do, kind of the Holy Trinity of jazz horn players, the Miles Davis Sextet, Coltrane, Cannonball, and Miles. Those three guys who stylistically were such opposites. You know, Miles was this real, like, cool kind of, he wouldn't give too much. He'd go, ba-doo, beep, doo-doo-doo-doo. You know what I mean? Really cool and sparse and great. You know, that silence is a great tool, by the way. I'd like to offer this piece of advice. And it's one that I'm still trying to get. You know, if you stop playing for a second and let the space ring there for a minute, then it immediately draws attention to you. So now, what's he going to play next? And then another space. And so you can make yourself the focus of attention more by not playing what you don't play than what you do. So anyway, those three. And then there was Miles, and then Coltrane, of course, at that point was in this searching mode, like, you know, sheets of sound, they called it, and a lot of notes, and just amazing, like totally unique sound and approach and everything. And then Cannonball, it would come in and go, you know, hey, it's a nice day. Happy. So these three completely contrasting styles where on paper, how can this work? And yet it was the almost unbelievable.
What a great study. What a great study.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Cannonball ultimately is the guy that I've related to the most. He was, in my mind, as heavy and as important a jazz musician as Bird and Miles and Dizzy and Coltrane. But he doesn't get as much credit. But man, was he an unbelievable.
And what was it about his sound and his playing that reached it for you?
Well, again, it was that joy, that complete command of the instrument, and just incredible hitness of the choices he made, the way he used the jazz language. Just man, he's good. I mean, it took Bird and just took it to another different level. I wouldn't say better than another level, but a different level, different interpretation. It just spoke to me.
That's a very important part to discuss because, again, a lot of the next generation that are out there and listening to this here, I know many of the names that you're mentioning, I always say to them, do the research. You know, Cannonball Adderley, I heard him live several times, and it was always, living in New York, it was always intense, it was always fun, and it always drew you back. You wanted to hear it again.
Right.
You wanted to come back again to hear it again. It wasn't like you were going to get bored.
No.
You knew something different was going to happen. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. But with all these players that you have and you're researching, so now you're studying, you're playing, you're involved in the studio scene. How intense was the studio scene at that time?
What do you mean intense?
Well, there was a lot of work at that time, you know, in the studios where you're performing for a variety of different artists. And you're being called in and you're going in and the work was there. It was an incredible time at the 70s and 80s at that time. It must have been magical.
It was.
Yeah.
It was, I tell you what, it was joy. Yeah. That's all I could say. It was. I suppose it was intense, but not from where I sat. From every day was an opportunity to hang with guys I knew, friends I liked and admired, and players that I just admired so greatly. Yeah. And in different configurations, I mean, it was never dull. Yeah. You know, because I could play. I remember I was on the Glenn Campbell Show Orchestra for a little while, and that was Marty Page was the band leader, and he would do even like arrange country tunes for us horns players, and a lot of times it was just footballs. But again, I'm listening, I'm thinking, I can learn from this, you know, because it's about fitting. Writing a good arrangement is as much about doing what's right for that tune and that singer as it is about having a hip arrangement. You know what I mean? It's doing what's right, for the context. And I learned that from guys like him, and then I worked for Quincy, who was a dear friend. In 1973, I believe, I had worked for Quincy as a player, and he knew my father, of course, really well. All the composers, by the way, knew and adored my father. He
Wow,
was a
what a
really
beautiful-
nice guy.
Beautiful.
Quincy called me, and he knew that I'd been writing and everything, I guess. I don't remember exactly, but he must have, because he said, Tom, my friend Sidney Poitier just directed his first film. It's a comedy, and it's called Uptown Saturday Night. And it's got him and Bill Cosby and Richard Pryor, all of the great black, actors and celebrities of that day who would appropriately be in a film like this. Harry Belafonte was in it. So Harry asked me who I thought would be the right guy to do the music, and I told him you, and he's waiting for your call at MGM. Is this phone working correctly? Have I got this right? So I called MGM, and lo and behold, there was Sidney Poitier. I went and met him, and as you could imagine, he was every bit the class act that he appears to be in life, in the movies. Yeah. Just a great guy. It was a joyous experience. I ended up writing the scores for 3 Sidney Poitier films.
So what does that entail? You kind of walk in, you have to sit down and discuss the movie and the feeling of scenes. What is that? I mean, this is a serious commitment now.
Yeah. Yeah. I had done a couple before that. I did the 5th of the Planet of the Apes series over at Fox.
Right.
I was kind of the young kid on the block at Fox. Lionel Newman was the head of the music department, one of the Newman brothers, along with Alfred, who was the composer. Lionel Amel was another music supervisor at Goldwyn. And then there was the Doctor brother, who's the father of Randy Newman. And David Newman, I think, also. Yeah. Anyway, a lot of Newmans. Yeah. But he was a champion of mine. So I wrote the 5th of the, as I say, it was called Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, right. 1972, 1, 2, something like that. So I'd had some film scoring experience, so I don't know whether that helped. I think Quincy's word probably, for a guy like Sidney, Quincy, whatever you say, I would guess. Yeah. But anyway, so you go in, what happens is the film by the time they bring in a composer, at least in those days, was in some stage, hopefully close to completion in the terms of the final edit. Right. Because, and you got to explain this to a lot of people, music is about timing. It's all about timing and where things come and this is how this happens all the time, where you'll get a scene that needs music, and you'll write the music to that scene and its timing and what's relevant, and then they'll call and say, listen, we cut the chase scene, and that sometimes is followed by, and it won't affect you. Yeah, like hell it won't affect me. I got to go back and figure out and in those days we did all the math longhand, like how to get from point A to point B in X number of seconds in X number of beats. Right. And there was a book this thick, which had every tempo from 12/0 click is like 120 beats per minute. Right. But 12-1 it's all based on frames of film, 24 frames in a second. Right. So a 12-frame click was half a second. But then they do 12-1, which is a 12 frames and 1 sprocket hole, which is a little bit slower than a 12. Yeah. And so this book, you'd go to a 12-3 or a 12. So let's say there was something that you really wanted to hit on a downbeat in 4/4 at 1 minute 6 and a third seconds. So you'd find the tempo where that downbeat is on, right. Okay, that's my tempo. And then you block out the whole cue that way. So this is after, of course, you've sat with usually the director, and decided where music should go. That's the first thing. And then there's next to him is a music editor. As you're watching this film, and you can go back and forth. That was a big deal in those days, by the way. At Universal, they had a back and forth room. What did that mean? There was a projector that actually you could stop and go back, and this was like high technology in 1969. Anyway, so yeah, the director would say, I want music to start here, and that would have a SMPTE number or, a start time. Music editor's over there, again, all analog, all pen and paper, pencil and paper. Yeah. So he'd be writing the start time, and he said, and the director will tell you, no, I wanted to get real angry here, or do this, and get chase, or a love scene, whatever it is, and then the music will end there. And so he takes that time, and we go through the whole movie that way, and each of these cues is assigned a number based on the reel and the music number in that reel. So the first cue would be M11, which means reel 1, music 1. And then the next was M12, music 1, real 1, music 2, and so on. And then reel 2, which, it's like that. So the music editor over there would spend the next day or two breaking down the scenes on a piece of paper, delineating every piece of significant action and dialogue in that scene. And so I get these sheets and I look at them, and although I've seen the film in the projection room, I don't have it. In those days, we didn't have video or anything like that. Yeah. So it's up to my memory and these notes to help broaden my memory. And with that, I have to decide what of this information here matters. Does any of it matter?
Absolutely.
Does just that thing matter? Or is there a sudden mood change there? Or, anything that could cause you to have to figure out how to make the music work for that scene.
But what an intense study of being able to analyze the music for a specific scene. Is that where you might have to come in to add an odd time signature to make up for a nanosecond of time?
Absolutely, so, sure. Okay, 3/8 bar or something, sure.
Absolutely.
Did it all the time.
So this is the overall understanding of how people get a little bit of an insight into what this really takes.
Yeah. There are machines now that compose music. Yeah. I wouldn't call it's more like wallpaper to me than music.
Yeah,
There's very little creative aspect to it.
Yeah.
It's just pick a sound over here and then add another sound here and put them together, and that's not composing to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What makes music great? What makes any of the arts great is that somebody sat down and sweated and really worked hard to come up with something that was special.
Absolutely.
None of that stuff that's generated with computers is special.
Absolutely. That emotional content that comes out of it really is a big part of what will move someone sitting in a chair watching the scene.
Unless I'm wrong, I mean, that's
that's it.
That's what's made the great classic music of all time, of all styles, last. That it's meaningful even now. That's passion. The passion that went into it, I think, is 90%. It's a lot of it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the music business side of it now, because here you are now. You're getting called for gigs. You're as a sideman. You're now composing, musical director. You're arranging. How did you organize all of that? How did you keep your records? How did you stay on time? How did you pull this off?
Well, a couple of times I didn't actually. I was a bit of a juggling act. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Again, I was very fortunate to enter the business at the time and have those skills that I had managed to acquire, on some of them on the fly, but I managed to make a living doing it, and I love the variety. I truly loved that so much, to score a film over here and then play a rock and roll session and then play a jazz gig at night. And I used to say, I know I like music, but I don't know what I want to do when I grow up.
We can still say that now, correct? Exactly right.
Yeah.
So in this part of the music business side,
yes, okay.
So you have a website.
Right.
Is there social media that you use now?
Facebook,
So you're involved with all that. We say social media is
kicking and screaming.
Yeah. Oh well, listen. The social media end is this necessary evil that from when we grew up to what we had to what we have to do now.
I understand.
Really, it's needed.
I know.
It's not necessarily fun.
No.
But you do it. You get involved with all that.
You do it. That's right.
You do it.
You have to.
And update your website. You keep things going on. So you have to. So again, the part of the business side is we have to maintain that side of it. You are your product, but you're also the CEO of your business to make sure.
Well, that's right. I mean, we don't listen. When I was on, I made a tour of record labels, just the way it turned out. I was on A&M and Columbia and Impulse, and I could name 4 or 5 more, GRP.
Yeah.
And in those days, if you were an artist on a major label like that, they did the marketing, they did the distribution, they did the publicity.
Right.
Hopefully. Now, there's none of that. Those aspects of the career are up to you, primarily. That's the gift or the curse of the era we now live in.
Yeah. Live playing, is there still much live playing going on where that still seems to be the fun and the enjoyment of performing live? Is that?
Well, it still is for me. I still do it when I can. It's not often, but I enjoy it immensely. I got 3 live dates next month, and I like to keep it. Keeps me fresh.
Yeah, absolutely. We have this next generation that is listening to your spoken word, and they're kind of watching these and all these different interviews that we do. We've had incredibly great artists as we have with you here, Tom. And I see you as this legend. When you played with all my favorite drummers. Really,
yeah, I did.
When I wanted to hear John Gurin, Gad. I mean, it just doesn't get any deeper than that. So I'd go and I'd follow them, and every time I'd follow these great drummers, Tom Scott name popped up. So I said, boy, this is really intense to see all this going on. This next generation needs to hear information that will motivate them and will give them the validation that a music career is possible now with many of the challenges. And we say challenges of today. We had challenges years ago.
Sure.
We had challenges. So the challenges have just changed.
That's right.
But they're always going to be there. Mm-hmm. In closing, what would you say to this next generation, that advice that you would give them to give them the hope and the dreams and maybe some of the tools and skills that they can continue?
Okay, that's easy. Because the first thing I would say is that don't fall prey to this idea that you're going to get some kind of easy way, that there's an easy road to success at this. Right. This is work, it's sweat, and it's learning a craft that will, to be, if you really aspire to be a professional, you've got to work at it for years and work hard at it and be passionate about it. I always tell people when I do clinics and stuff, who's your favorite instrumentalist or singer in this area in which you want to pursue? Who's the person you would like to be? Okay, now ask yourself, are you dedicated enough and capable enough and to do all the things necessary to actually be able to, at some point, compete with that person? Yeah, yeah. If the answer is, I'm not so sure, I either have want to work that hard, or I don't think then don't go there. Yeah. Do something else. And music can still be a tremendously enjoyable part of your life. Yeah, yeah. But it's a hard slog, and you've got to be willing and very, very desirous of it, to the exclusion of everything else almost. Yeah. Now that's what it was for me. It was, I hate to use the word obsession, but maybe it was.
Absolutely.
I thought about jazz. I used to get up at high school, I'd set my alarm for an hour early and had my phonograph down here, and I would put on Miles Davis' My Funny Valentine. Oh, fantastic. With Herbie Hancock and George Coleman and Ron Carter and Tony Williams. Yeah. And just, that would make my day. And I memorized all those solos. I could play Herbie's intro on piano and George Coleman's solo and all of them. But you gotta really, I don't want to say obsess, but you gotta really work hard at it. It's something that will take hours of acquiring the skills necessary.
But very, very profound. One last point. What motivates you?
I tell you what, the love of what I do, the love of my craft. I wake up in the morning and I can't wait. If I've got a arranging gig, I can't wait to get there to that work table. Or if I've got a gig, I think about it and obsess, like what tunes are we going to play, and who's in the band, and planning, and every detail. It's just something that I love doing. I will always love that.
That is fantastic. Tom, I have been so honored to meet you because I have been so impressed with you as a performer, so impressed with what you have arranged, and so impressed with what you have composed, so impressed with when you play. You have that Cannonball Adderley hope and enthusiasm when you're playing. It really does. And when you hear it, it just wants me to come back again and hear you again.
Oh, so thanks.
Continue with that. You have done fantastic. On behalf of the sessions, we thank you so much, Tom. What a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.